he considered himself lucky to get a job with the newly formed Quarantine Authority, a branch of the Office of Homeland Security that was assigned to protect the wall that stood between the infected and the rest of the world. But all that was 2 years ago. It felt like another lifetime. Today, his job was a routine sweep with the Coast Guard. Earlier that morning, a surveillance plane had spotted a small group of survivors, known as unincorporated civilian casualties by the politicians in Washington, but simply as uncles by the flyboys in the Quarantine Authority, working to wrest a wrecked shrimp boat loose from a tangle of cables and nets and overgrown vegetation. Most of the boats left in the Houston ship channel were half-sunken wrecks, and what hadn't sunk was hopelessly, intractably, mired in muck and garbage. There was no chance at all that a handful of uncles could get a boat loose from all that mess and make a run for it. And even if they could, they'd never be able to beat the blockade of Coast Guard cutters waiting just offshore. They'd be blasted out of the water before they lost sight of land. But the Quarantine Authority's mission was to make sure nobody escaped from the zone. And so the order had gone out, as it had numerous times before, to mobilize and neutralize as necessary. Now, along with 3 other pilots from the Quarantine Authority, Barnes was slowly moving south toward the Houston ship channel. Once there, he'd rendezvous with the boys from the Coast Guard's Helicopter Interdiction Tactical Squadron, known as HITRON, and act as forward observers while the H-boys took care of any survivors who might be trying to escape to the Gulf of Mexico. "Good God, would you look at them," said Ernie Fox, one of the Quarantine Authority pilots off to Barnes's right. In the old days, Fox had made his living flying helicopters back and forth from the oil rigs just offshore. He was an irredeemable redneck, but cool under pressure, especially in bad weather. Barnes glanced up from the ruins below and saw a string of 7 orange and white Coast Guard helicopters closing on their position. Even from a distance, Barnes could pick out the silhouettes of the HH-60 Jayhawks and the HH-65 Dolphins. "You know what those babies are?" said Paul Hartle, a former HPD pilot and Barnes's preferred flanker. "Those are chariots of the gods, my friend. Ain't a helicopter made that can hold a candle to those bad boys." "I'd love to fly one of them things," answered Fox. "I bet they're faster than your sister, Hartle. Sure are prettier." "Fuck you, Fox." Fox made kissy noises at him. "All right, guys, kill the chatter," Barnes said. Technically, he was supposed to write up the guys when they cussed on the radio, but he let it slide. A little friendly kidding was good for morale. And besides, as pilots, Barnes and the others were seen as hotshots within the Quarantine Authority. They were held to different standards, given special privileges, looked up to by the common guys on the wall. Being pilots, they had to do more, take bigger risks. It was why all these guys loved flying, why they kept coming back. But in every profession there is a hierarchy, and while Barnes and his fellow Quarantine Authority pilots had a firm grip on the upper rungs of the status ladder, the very top rung was owned by the H-boys from the Coast Guard's HITRON Squadron. Originally created to stop drug runners in high-speed cigarette boats off the Florida coast, the H-boys now did double duty patrolling the quarantine zone's coastline. They flew the finest helicopters in the military, and their gun crews had enough ordnance at their disposal to turn anything on the water into splinters and chum. The pilots in the Quarantine Authority worshipped them, wanted to be them when they grew up. It was the Quarantine Authority Air Corps, in fact, that had come up with the H-boys' nickname. "Papa Bear calling Quarter 4-1. Quarter 4-1 was Barnes's call sign. Papa Bear was Coast Guard Captain Frank Hayes on board the P-3 Orion that was circling overhead. "Quarter 4-1, go ahead, sir." "I'd like to welcome you and your men to the show, Officer Barnes. Now, all elements, stand by to Susie, Susie, Susie." "Mama Bear 6-1, Roger, Susie." Barnes scanned the line of orange and white helicopters until he saw one to the far right, dipping its rotors side to side.